get Dr. Kambidi to come and present. I'm not sure exactly what time it is over there, but it does look quite early, so your commitment is much appreciated. Dr. Kambidi is a TESOL professor at Anaheim University in the US, where he lectures on language teaching and computer-assisted language learning. He's authored an amazing 142 textbooks, including titles from Pearson. And again, we'd like to thank them for their generous support. And without further ado, over to you, Dr. Beatty.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. And yes, it is early in the morning. It's just after 5 here. I'm in Montreal, Canada. I'm Canadian, actually, even though I work with an American university. And yes, I am wearing pajama bottoms. So I think that's sort of a standard thing with Zoom meetings. All right, so we're talking about education is changing, and I think so many of us are facing so many challenges these days. You know, there's more than 1.5 billion students out of school. A lot of you will be parents and maybe teaching kids at school. Australia has done a lot to beat the curve, but elsewhere in the world it remains challenging, particularly in the United States these days. So I'd like to talk about some good things and some things that we can be doing looking forward. All right, so without question, everything is different now. Remember classrooms? I'm not sure how soon or how long it'll take you to be getting back into a classroom, face-to-face conversations, but it's really not happening in Canada. We're at the university level, we're really just pushing back. The private language schools have been very, very badly hit in terms of being able to conduct classes, and everybody's turning to these platforms. So they're turning to distance learning. It's an interesting thing because it's kind of an old thing and kind of a new thing, but the technology is changing all of it. When I was a very young teacher 100 years ago, just starting out, I actually taught on the side correspondence courses where everything was done by mail. How exciting was that? So yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing to sort of do that and communicate back and forth, not synchronously, but asynchronously. So the technology has always been there to teach at a distance, but now the technologies are changing and we have to adapt to them in some ways. Some teachers are finding local and modern solutions to what they're doing. This is quite exciting because in different places where you live, you come up with some solution that will work for you and not work for others. So those are some of the ones that we'll be exploring. In the talk that I'm giving today, I've got you saw from the opening slide that I actually have a sort of this split idea, and I'm trying to do this, and this fits into this local idea. One is the big global picture, and for those I've used some beautiful pictures from the space station of Australia, and then I'm going down to the local level, and for those I use flowers and vegetation from various parts of the world where I've been over the last year or so. I travel a lot, and for me, everything has changed. Last year, I had 50 flights to 12 countries, visiting 20 cities. This year, nada, right? Nothing. So it's all different. So let's talk about some of the challenges. Okay, so I'd like to go through each of these in turn. First of all, internet access, it's a necessity and a human right. We'll explore some of the reasons for each of these. The role of peers as educators is becoming more important than ever. There's a rapid expansion of distance education. The use of social media for sharing ideas and assignments is now possible and to be encouraged. The importance of digital professional development is happening. And of course, this is today is just an example of that. The evolution of the textbook into a multimedia tool, and global responsibility for education. Each of these are different and important in their own ways, and all together fit together. So opportunities. So today we've got the opportunity to change the paradigms and rethink how teaching and learning should happen. Now, this is really an important idea because what's happening in most cases is your administrator phones you up and says, sorry, schools are closing because of COVID-19. You have to teach online. And click, you sort of, that's the end of the conversation. But actually, and so we end up doing teaching new information and current information in kind of old ways, trying to maintain a classroom with Zoom, having all our students there instead of in the classroom. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, but there's parts that definitely don't work, but we're not changing them just because we're so harried and so rushed into dealing with everything else. So we kind of need to rethink how teaching and learning should be happening in this age. Many of the online solutions will endure long after educational institutions open. Students aren't going to want to go back. They're absolutely not. They're getting used to having some lessons online, and many of them are going to challenge the question, say, sorry, why are we meeting in a class today if we're just, taking a test or listening to a lecture, things like that. They don't want to do it. So it's going to be interesting times post-COVID to see what pushback we get from students and how we can address their needs. And these are opportunities if you teach in a private language school. You have a high quality, effective and efficient program. Why just teach in Australia? Your students can be coming in from anywhere in the world. And just to give a bit of a background, in my own teaching, I do teach online. I teach graduate students and doctoral students, but all my classes are online. We have meetings once a year for residential sessions, but otherwise it's online. Okay, so what can you do? First of all, you're already doing it. How great is that? You're attending sessions like this and you're improving yourself. So you're looking for solutions. The other big thing that we're doing right now is we're improving our skill sets. People who had never heard of Zoom 6 months ago, and that includes me, wow, everybody around the world is suddenly engaging with this in a big way and having to pick up that. And I was listening to the other presenters and just, quickly writing down all of the new topics, all of the new apps and such that they're using for their presentations online. Working with others is another big thing. And again, we're doing this, just a bit of contact here, but it's becoming important because we're so isolated. Actually working with others is very important. Okay, so let's look at the challenges and the opportunities and what each of us can do, because it's going to be a little bit different for everyone. Okay, so internet access is a necessity and a human right. I suspect that nobody here is sort of saying, absolutely not. Nobody's going to push back against this one. But there are problems that we face with this. There's a digital divide between those who can afford or have access to the basic tools for online education, a computer and Wi-Fi access. That's the very, very sort of bottom line that you have here. Now, this happens in every country. It's not just to say that, Australia, you're okay, and Canada, we're okay. It actually varies within countries, within communities. Many educational authorities are either unwilling or unable to give students the tools and resources that they need. I know that most of our attendees today are teaching adults. They say, you're an adult, buy your own computer, buy your own, access, everything else. But, for people who are in particular immigrants or from poorer socioeconomic conditions, they have challenges with that. We see this, a lot of headlines associated with this one from coming out of, not surprisingly, the United States. This one says coronavirus forces online learning, but what if you can't afford the internet? And this contrasts, this sort of question is being raised everywhere. And along with that is COVID-19 makes it clearer than ever that the internet should be a universal right. This is Tim Berners-Lee, the guy who actually truly created the internet. He was the first one to write the World Wide Web protocols for doing that. And the idea is that it's kind of mistaken in terms of what he's saying right here. We're not saying that, that internet should be an a universal right. What we're really saying is that education should be a universal right. And if the only way to get that education is through the internet, then that's what makes it an international right. So that kind of has to reframe the conversation a little bit, because there is, again, pushback from internet companies who want to continue to make their products for sale at, available at a price. There's pushback from governments who don't want to pay for this sort of thing. But again, if you just say you build schools, you build universities, the internet is just the new school or the new university. So more than half the world's population is not using the internet, doesn't have access to it. This is kind of an old figure. Unfortunately, this is from 2016, but it's the most current one that I could find this week. And again, Australia, Canada, Russia, we kind of look good, and most parts of Europe pretty good. But actually, as I say, within that, pockets are terrible. So some places are pushing forward with this whole idea. One of them, curiously enough, is Kerala, India. They have actually written into their state constitution that the internet access is a universal right. Interesting things turn from this, and if you're lobbying governments, either local or regional or national, then actually there's other little things that start working here. This sort of feeds into opportunities to reduce paper. For governments to make all services available online. And in Canada, we've actually been giving mobile phones to people on the street. To the homeless. That's one of the things we've been doing, just to basically get them access to government services. The European Union is moving in the same direction. So it's partly the thinking. And again, we have to be a bit of to agitate for this as teachers if we think that it's important. There's a lot of opportunities. Many organizations are trying to get computers and Wi-Fi access in the hands of students that needs them. In Canada, we've got a lot of programs here who sort of identify students in schools, and schools are aware of this, so they just contact these groups. A big one that they do is they contact companies. They work with companies, not just individuals, because a company, they change their computers all the time. They say, yeah, we've got 5,000, Dells from 2 years ago, but we're replacing them all. So they hand them over and then they get them into the hands of students. It's fantastic. So political leaders are increasingly feeling the pressure to help teachers and students. And an important part of our job is to keep up that pressure. So what can you do? What can you do? This is going to be a leitmotif throughout this entire presentation. So what can you do? So first of all, do you have an old computer or mobile phone that you no longer use? I'm ashamed to say I do. I've got like a stack of computers in the back room. I've got a lot of proprietary data because I write so many textbooks. I want to be really careful all those things are cleaned out, but I will get around to it in the next week, I promise, to handing those over to donate them. I also have a dozen phones, which you think, half a dozen phones sort of sitting on the table here. I was looking at them last night. Which again is one in many parts of the world is how students attend school. Collect and share data about your students' needs. So be public and attract attention. So if you find that your students don't have access to Wi-Fi, they don't have that, a little article in the newspaper, an online thing, a Facebook group, anything else, that might lead to the solution that you get. We see all these GoFundMe projects going on when somebody identifies a need, and your need might be part of that. Ask businesses to share their Wi-Fi passwords. This is really a simple one, and it's been done. And at the same time, I saw a headline in the New York Times last week, and it said, students shouldn't have to be doing their lessons in parking lots. But actually, it's better to be able to do them in a parking lot next to a bank that's made its Wi-Fi available than to do it, not at all. So again, it's kind of an interesting idea, just making businesses sharing their Wi-Fi so students can work in different places out on the street if they can. See if others in the community can help. There's lots of groups that can maybe do this, and find ways to teach at a distance offline. I was giving a talk a couple of months ago, and I got the most heartbreaking email afterwards from a teacher in Peru. And, here I am going all about, Wi-Fi and computers and phones and all these things and teaching online. And he wrote me and he said, Dr. Beatty, he said, many of my students don't even have electricity in their homes. I thought, oh my goodness, it's a whole other level. So again, we probably have to make sure that actually, we make assumptions that, oh yes, well, everybody's got a computer, everybody's got a phone, or they can get online somewhere. But if the libraries are closed, as they were until recently here, what are they doing? So we need to think about that. Okay, the second point is the role of peers as educators. And again, all these photos are either mine or they're photos from the space station. So beautiful photos of Australia. What about peers? This is a little bit different. Okay, so the good news and bad news we say is many people appreciate teachers more than ever. This especially parents who suddenly realize the jobs that teachers have to do all day, and that they're, otherwise brilliant little darlings, are actually require a lot more care and attention to get through their lessons. So they sort of starting to respect that. The bad news is that, those teachers aren't there. So in many contexts, the student isn't able to get the same access to a teacher. Adults are a little bit better. They can always email, but again, that takes a certain amount of linguistic sophistication to do so, to frame and to ask a question, and even just to work up the courage to do so. So it's a little bit different. Everyone needs help. Learners may know someone who helps outside of, within their peer group. Sometimes it's somebody outside their peer group. It's just, an uncle or, cousin or somebody, locally who could do that. How can we find ways to make the online teaching and learning experience mirror the best parts of traditional learning experience? Well, for part of that, we need to consider what are the best parts of the face-to-face learning experience. It's interesting because it seems to be changing. Like, students' perceptions are maybe not the same perceptions that we have as teachers. Let's look at some of this. So what's different? Well, traditional classrooms are social. And this is probably one of the greatest things, is that you go to class and you meet. I've talked a lot in the past about MOOCs, massive open online classes. They're not working. They don't work. If you look at the enrollments in many of them, they just plummet after the first class. Why? Everybody signs up, and there's nothing to hold you to sort of hang around and stay in it. So if you sort of think, oh, I'll sign up for this, and then you say, oh, I've got other things to do, or there's a new TV show on or something, I'd rather do that. People get bored and they drop out. In a social classroom, it's part of the glue that holds you together. You feel like, you would be embarrassed to walk down the street and see a fellow student if you just dropped out. So it's just small, subtle pressures. Face-to-face classes encourage a wide range of learning interactions to take place, from pair and group work to peer teaching. And these are not just, the important thing about this is it's not just the pair and group work that we assign. In a classroom, all these things are going on, and not just in the classroom, but at the break time, over lunch or something else. Two people run into each other and they say, oh, you know what? I had no idea what the teacher was talking about today when she said, and so they're able to solve each other's problems. So the question is, can we replicate some of these casual and broader social interactions online? Well, it's challenging. It's a little bit challenging. The other thing is that feedback becomes very, very distant. And we often have to think about all the verbal and nonverbal feedback that you give students. How does this work online? This is a photo I took in Sao Paulo at a street festival last year. I love this photo just simply because there are so many different expressions on all of the faces. You can go through, everybody has a sort of different reaction to what's going on, and of course the actors themselves. Think about all that feedback that you're going back and forth. And the story that springs to mind was of a young girl who was supposed to be online taking a class, and her mom comes into the room and the computer is playing, but she's down on the floor playing with her toys. She's like 8 years old, and the mother says, why aren't you sitting in front of the computer learning? She says, oh, she won't know that I'm not there. I've just put a picture of myself on screen like this, and she never asks me a question, and she just assumes that I'm there. So if 8-year-olds are doing that, really the message for us is that the engagement with the teacher is not the same as what it was in a traditional class. If somebody could get away with basically putting up a paper cardboard cutout of themselves, digital but otherwise. Okay, so what are some opportunities? So feedback can happen in a number of ways online, both during and after class. This is another part of that paradigm shift that we're talking about. When you go to your administrator, or your administrator came to you and said, okay, you just have to teach online. There is no adjustment of hours, no adjustment of hours. In fact, it's much more work for you because you're preparing lessons for online that maybe are different than the ones you would do in the class, plus you're learning technology, plus everything else. The feedback, there should be time for that. So maybe shorter classes and more time for feedback outside of class. Also, encouraging students to sometimes identify who can work with them and who can help them. One thing that I recommend for everyone is the whole idea of the buddy system. So you always want to have some sort of buddy, somebody helping out who they can always go to. But again, that raises privacy concerns. You don't want to sort of just give out emails or randomly assign people. So that can be a challenge as well. What can you do? Organize students into pairs and groups and make them jointly responsible for learning when they're not in class. Use more pair tasks and more group marks, more than you would normally in a classroom. And I was just watching a presentation on pronunciation this morning, or this evening for you. And I was thinking, okay, how could you do that? Well, easily, you could just get them to do the work, videotape their, pronunciations together in a group, have a little conversation using the key, pronunciation, whatever focus it is, and hand that in. It just makes it social. The purpose is to make it social. The students think that they're just finishing an assignment, but really what you're trying to do is make it more social so that learning and socialization and extra English takes place outside of class. For group presentations, choose the student to present so everyone's prepared. I always have students number off. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I will choose which number presents. So, they all go away. And the wonderful thing about this approach is that the best students help the weakest students a lot, because if it's a group mark, they want the least able student to be much as prepared as they are to present. Otherwise, everybody loses out. So it's just a very simple way to sort of do that. With more able learners, turn them into more effective peer educators, give them breaks on their assignments or homework and say, listen, could I instead get you to, do something with this other student, practice 1 hour, and for that, I'm going to give you, this many marks or something else. Okay, enable social skills. One thing is to set boundaries of what you expect students to do online and working outside of class. So how do you disagree with respect? How do you express feelings? Read social clues. How do you share things? How do you show empathy to other people? How to use active listening? Things like this are all important. And again, students probably do this automatically in their first language, but often when we're learning a second language, this becomes a little more abstract for us. It's a little more challenging to add these layers. One thing when you're setting the boundaries, of course, is get the students to do it. I'm a big one for the lazy teacher principle. Anything that I could do, if the students can do it instead, it's language practice. So get them to set their own guidelines for what they should do. Involve peers. Ask who can help you to make students aware of the resources available to them. And again, everybody knows somebody. I mean, it might be the guy at the grocery store down around the corner that they could maybe go chat to for 5 minutes a day or something and ask some other questions. Okay, the third point is the rapid expansion of distance education. Okay, so teachers are being asked to immediately switch to teaching online. We've talked about this. There are many tools to help them, but little guidance on what's the best one. Fantastic today, sort of hearing about some new products, but again, trying to see which are the best ones. We need to be sharing that and sharing that more broadly than just in this particular meetings. Students are not prepared to learn online. Again, we sort of assume we're thinking about all the challenges that we're facing as teachers going online, but students actually don't really know how to do it. Like if they're sitting there, I know my own sons, two sons who are in university, and I'm thinking, the younger one is just, sitting in bed, sort of, watching videos of his teachers giving lectures. And, I'm thinking, why aren't you taking notes? Well, I've got the video, come on, so it's some different skills that they have to start picking up on. Technology will not replace teachers, but teachers who understand technology will replace teachers who don't. Okay, we've heard this before. It's a good time to be learning new skills for the long term, because I think even if COVID, even if we get a vaccine next week, everybody's over this, there's going to be something else, some other problem like this coming out. And also it's a new opportunity to expand your audiences to be teaching other students from other areas. So you can practice on your own. If you're worried about some of the technologies, I encourage you to practice on your own. Before I started going on Zoom, I had some Zoom dinners. So this is my friends in Germany, and we decided to for their dinner and my lunch, we were making some dumplings. The major thing that I learned is that I'm never getting a job at a Chinese restaurant, but it was a lot of fun. Practice with platforms like Zoom and other ways. It can be useful for social purposes as well. This is something that, again, you could tell your students, say, hey, you know what? I did this Zoom thing, cooking a meal together. Again, if they can do that with somebody else, it's a great idea. What can you do? Ask who can help me. Might be other teachers and administrators as well as students, because you need help. You need support. You need to air the problems and the challenges that you're having. You need to keep track of your time and say, you know what, I'm spending like so much more time in preparation right now. That should be reflected somehow, and you need to share that with everyone. Work with the tools and resources your students have available. Ask your students, what do you use? If they all use WhatsApp, you might start thinking about, okay, maybe you could use that to learn English out of class, and think in that way, starting off with what they already have accessible to them could be useful. Okay, 4, use of social media for sharing ideas and assignments. Class time is limited. And I think even more so now, a lot of us are having classes which are a little bit shorter, and we're giving more assignments. And many students complain actually that their workload has increased as teachers expect them to do more assignments, and quite often assignments that are easy to mark afterwards. So we're handing out so many worksheets. I talk to my friends with young kids, especially, they're getting just like deluge of worksheets, because it makes the teacher feel like, yes, the students are doing something, but it's not quite the same thing. A lot of students feel alone. They feel quite isolated, and they're used to having that camaraderie or support from others. Even the sort of thing is when I'm looking at a screen like this, and if I don't understand, I mean, in a classroom, you can look around and sort of say, yeah, everybody else has their mouth open going, they don't understand either. But on screen, you feel alone. So what are some opportunities? Well, find some ways for students to use social media for learning English. So again, back to the WhatsApp or anything like that. Are there some things that you can be doing to do this, to be conversing with other students? Learning that's enjoyable is never considered work. So again, if you can think of fun things to do, and again, you don't have to be the ones to think of it. Ask your students, how could you use your app to learn English? What would be a fun thing that you could do? Oh, maybe we could do a treasure hunt in English or something. We'll give us a list of places, and we'll go around the city and we'll photograph banks, for teaching something about the names of businesses or buildings or something like that. Think of something that's fun, that's appropriate to the media. So what can you do? Have students work in pairs and groups outside of class and doing unique projects together. I'm a big one for variations on a theme with my own students. I start off with a question always, how can you show me what you know? How can you show me what you know? And that's really the only question we should be asking in terms of assessment, so that students can show us what they know, not that they can repeat some subset of what we taught them. They can't, be mind readers. You teach them 10,000 things. We test them on 100. They pass or fail, and we think we've done our job. We haven't. So something else, though, is when we give students unique assignments, is when everybody is doing something different, they collaborate. When everybody is doing the same project, the same essay or whatever, they compete. They keep resources to themselves. They don't share their process or their task or their results. But when they're doing something unique, why not? Just make it little variations. So look for variations in a theme in your assignments. If you're saying, okay, I want each of you to write about a country or something like that, everybody pick a different country, or a business or a food or anything. It doesn't matter what topic you're discussing, but just simply by getting every student or pair or group of students to do something different, but on the same theme, they will share. They will share automatically what they're doing. Okay, so they can use social media to keep in touch and feel less alone, especially those with few friends. And think about some international students who are caught far from home. One of my friends who's a teacher in Montreal said one of her students had stayed in his apartment for 6 weeks because he was from Taiwan and his parents were so terrified. They said, do not go out of your apartment. So all of his meals and all of his food was delivered for 6 weeks. I just thought, really, how isolated he must feel. Okay, changes the assessment strategies. Okay, students can work together on unique projects. As I've said, ask the students for their ideas for different ways to show what they know. Oh, teacher, can I do a PowerPoint? Sure, absolutely. Teacher, I would like to do a puppet show to illustrate the pronunciation. Go for it, fantastic. Can I do a set of drawings and talk about them in a video, or take a set of photographs or do something else? I'm open, for my own students. I do this all the time. I end up with amazing and interesting and innovative things that I wouldn't have thought of because, of course, it's a different generation. They're coming up with new ideas. Okay, number 5, what's the importance of digital professional development? Okay, well, this is exactly what we're doing right now. It's a steep learning curve to understand how to teach online, and it's not just the software. You need to rethink about how you engage and motivate students, how you offer them feedback, how you assess them. All of these things have to be are a little bit different now than they were before. So it's a good time to reach out to all your stakeholders to get them to debate and agree on new approaches. So again, I've mentioned this before, but this idea of the administrator who simply tells you what to do, it's not good enough anymore. You have to sort of engage and say, okay, what do the students need? What do they want? Are they feeling like they're, getting the education that's of the same quality or higher quality than what they were getting face-to-face? What can we do to make that happen? So together, dream together of the perfect online experience. You don't have to say, well, if we use this, we could do this. Just say, what exactly would a perfect online class be like? Let's start with that as an idea, and then try to think, how can we make that work? So what can you do? Start by making a list of what you know, what you're able to do with technology. And you can do this with your students as well. Identify areas where you need to learn and to improve. So it's kind of a reflective task we should go through. And as I'm saying this, I know so many people are so overwhelmed with time, their own family commitments and everything else. It seems difficult to take on one more little task, but I think it has payoff. Talk to others who see who could help and to get a direction to follow. So taking charge of your own learning path, it starts with just saying, what do I know? So, of course, I know, like most of you would be identical to me on all of these things. This online assessment is a big issue for me. How do I deal with cheating in gradebook? Well, I start talking to people. So one solution to the online assessment one is you send the test to the students and then they use Zoom, but the camera is not pointed. The camera is not pointed at the face. It's pointed at the sheet. So this is something, again, just through a conversation. That's a partial solution to some of these things. So start thinking about all the different challenges that you face, what you can do already with your technology, and maybe where you should bolster that with some additional learning. Stay in touch. Many publishers like Pearson have regular professional development webinars that help you improve your existing skill and pick up new ones. So take advantage of those. Talk to your reps. If you're using a textbook from any publisher, just go back to your reps, demand. Say, what else can you do to help me? Because I know, so many publishers are putting up so many materials online to sort of help you, and extra resources you may not have known were there. Okay, what about the textbooks? This is our 6th point out of 7. The evolution of the textbook into a multimedia tool. This is so interesting, and I write textbooks, as we say. I'm up to about 142, maybe 148 now. But I write a lot of textbooks, and I long for the old days. My first textbooks, we had a cassette tape, primary school textbooks, and that's all that we had to do. But now it's, it's the website, it's the, multimedia, it's having everything, the test data bank, it's, it just goes on forever. So the app, all the things that sort of have to be considered. Well, it's changing. Well, it's good for us. It's good for teachers to have these things. But the reasons that we need textbooks have not changed. They organize the process of teaching and learning, and they reflect current content and pedagogy with extensive resources. The most important thing is this scope and sequence. What is taught, When is it taught? I have horror stories about going into classrooms and seeing a wall of textbooks on the wall of the teacher's office and saying, so which book do you use? She says, oh, a bit of this, a bit of that. And you see the photocopy machine right there going full blast. It's great. You know, the teacher's teaching whatever she feels on a day-to-day basis, but she doesn't have that scope of everything being covered. And the sequence of it is not such where something's being introduced and reintroduced time after time. But most textbooks were not designed for being used online. And I think actually these coming years will be quite excited where publishers will be starting from the ground up and saying, okay, let's create an online product that really works well. So you have to find ways to combine the best of online opportunities and the content of your textbooks. Take advantage of the digital parts of the textbooks in new ways, sort of see what they could be used for. What can you do? Start by looking at the digital resources that your textbook and your publishers already have to offer. I'll just show you, this is one that I've been working on recently on the series Consultant for It. It's an 8-level English series, but it comes with an app. It's got all this stuff online. There's also all these downloadable masters that you can send off email to students. You can create tests, customize the tests, and send them to different students. You know, so if you don't want the students cheating, you can actually edit the test a little bit automatically and send different versions to groups of students or to different students if you wanted to. So it's a lot of there's a lot of things that are like already sitting there, but you might not be aware of them because you haven't used them in class. Now we've just created an ebook version of this, and so, you know, a lot of things like that are available. And I'm not just talking about this particular product, but all across the board. So look at public resources like YouTube, find content that helps your students, or better yet, ask them to do it. Again, always push the work back to the students. It's a great assignment because they're using all those critical thinking faculties and things like that. Reduce the teacher talk time. You know, think about having your students do more of the teaching. Okay, we've got 10 weeks, 10 units. I want, you know, each student, group of students to present, you know, one small portion of each lesson each week. It's not a lot to ask, but again, takes a little stress off you, and it's a great opportunity for the students. Okay, now we come to the 7th and last point. Okay, what's a global responsibility for education? All right, so we're all in this together. You know, it sounds like a big thing, but you know, it's true. It's true, and we do have the impact. And here I am in Canada. You're in Australia, for the most part. You know, it's a chance to reach out around the globe and sort of help each other in different ways. Carl Sagan wrote. He said, "It is clear that the nations of the world can now only rise and fall together. It is not a question of one nation winning at the expense of the other. We must all help one another or all perish together." I think this is true. I think basically we're facing this situation where it's so challenging to try to support each other. You know, you feel like things could just tumble down if we're not sort of doing more to sort of help each other. And it just starts, you know, in your own neighborhoods. It starts with your own city and country, but also, you know, opportunities to help people in other places is really important these days. So what are some of the challenges again? Although our personal teaching and learning challenges may seem unique, our problems are shared by millions of teachers worldwide. And I'm getting so much feedback on these. We've got, I've been doing these webinars sort of capped at 1,000 students because of the software, and then, or 1,000 teachers, and then we're getting 3,000 teachers register from all around the world. It's crazy, but it's, again, the hunger for knowledge is there. So teachers are in the business of building the future. There's a lot at stake for what we do, so we have to think of ways to make that happen. What are the opportunities? More than ever before, the internet now allows us to reach out to others, sharing problems and offering ideas. So again, starting off with something like YouTube, you know, if you have something that's really, really working, and again, I think a lot of these ideas today will be shared online with other teachers, you know, that's great. Put it out there. So don't, you know, just keep your little ideas to yourself, you know, now, or present at a conference next year, or write a paper. Think about what you've done and what you do well in the digital age, and what maybe you could share to really help other teachers. It'd be part of the conversation. What can you do? Consider what you can do to take education beyond the classroom, and ask students for ideas for public projects. So this is a funny thing. I see stuff all the time that, about educating the public, and it's a weird one. And I know not all of these are for adults, but like, for example, I see crosswalks with numbers on them. I've seen them with dates, days of the week or something like that. It's just a little subtle thing that sort of actually takes education beyond. This was something just around the corner from me, one of my neighbors. I love this. He's an astronomer. So he's created just this little fence in front of his property, something between the Earth and the moon, so just the distance there. So it's a great thing. Okay. Join with other teachers. Are you part of the local or national teachers association? Join a committee, contribute to the journal, network in other ways. All of these are good. Reach out. Teacher, after one of my presentations, I'm not doing it again, but she was from Romania. She said, could you talk to my students? I thought, you know what? I could. Really, it's half an hour of my life. I could do a little Zoom meeting with these students. So that's good. But
right, Dr. Beatty, I think we're going to have to wrap it up. We're almost out of time there. Fantastic.
This is the last slide. Thanks. Okay, but be easy on yourself. And this is from the Government of Canada, some principles for federal staff. It says you are not working from home. You are at home during a crisis trying to work. Your personal, physical, and emotional health are more important than anything else right now. You should not try to compensate for lost productivity by working longer hours. Actually, the list goes on. But the idea is basically, take care of yourself when you're doing this. Start slowly, get help, grow. As teachers, we're used to adapting to new situations and finding the best ways to tailor teaching and learning to our students' needs. It's no different now. We're just going to find other ones. Thank you. Thank you so much. There's my email if you have any questions. Yeah. Okay, over to you.